Ka pai, tēnā koutou katoa, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou kua hui hui mai nei I tēnei pō. Nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, kaki mai, ki tēnei zui, ki te webinar nei, o te rōpū whakakore para kirihau, koutou ko Mindful Money. Tēnā koutou. Welcome everyone to this webinar, Plastic Pollution Delusions, Divesting from Polluters and False Solutions. It's awesome to have all of you here join us today for what's going to be a great, really fascinating conversation, I'm sure. So I'd just like to begin our hui with the karakia. This one's called Whakataka Te Hau, you may know it. So welcome to speak along as we go. Tākena te karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu. Ti hei mauri ora. This karakia, I think, is a good reflection on where we are in the seasons. It's cold, very cold at the moment, but looking forward to the warmer months. But I think also maybe it's a reflection on where we are in the global struggle against plastic pollution, and acknowledging that just in the last week, what was meant to be the final negotiations for the Global Plastics Treaty, the talks collapsed and ended without any agreement, thanks to just a handful of states with deeply vested interests in the petrochemical industry, not willing to budge on their very low ambitions. So while we're no closer to an agreement, it's, I'm sort of invoking hope that whatever comes next in whatever comes next in the process might be a turning point, a new dawn, and finally we'll get to an ambitious treaty to end plastic pollution. But yeah, today we're here to talk about false solutions and plastic pollution. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists this evening, speaking about a few of the common false solutions to the plastic pollution crisis and some viable actions to adequately address this crisis as well. And we're going to hear from Mindful Money about their new report on ocean pollution with a focus on plastics and the implications for finance and investment. We'll have a very short Q&A after each presentation with some questions we've prepared, but once we've heard from all of our speakers, we want to open it up to a Q&A and discussion, and we invite you to ask your questions. So please do write your questions in the chat as we go. I'll be, and probably some of us will be watching those as they go, and we'll try to answer or ask as many of those to our panelists as we can towards the end of the webinar. We probably won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can. So this webinar was inspired by the False Solutions campaign run by the Asia Pacific branch of the Break Free from Plastics movement. And we're just really happy to be teaming up with Mindful Money to bring some of these important topics to new audiences. So yeah, just want to acknowledge Mindful Money, and in particular Tash and Sophie, for all of your work getting this webinar organized and reaching out in the first place, and to Barry and others for all the great work that you do. And for those of you who don't know about Mindful Money, they're a charity that promotes ethical investment and transparent information on KiwiSaver funds. And on that vein as well, I better introduce myself and who we represent. So I'm from the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance. My name's Liam Prince, I'm the chairperson. We at the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance, or APA for short, we're a collaborative group of scientists, researchers, educators, lawyers, artists, activists, businesses, community leaders, and many more who are working together to end plastic pollution in Aotearoa, in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, and beyond, and to restore the mauri of Papatuanuku, Ranginui, Tangaroa, and all of our tai ao. So we've been participating in the negotiations at the UN for an agreement to end plastic pollution, which has been going on for a few years now, which is informally known as the Global Plastics Treaty. And just a shout out to the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Plastics, the Tangata Whenua Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty, and the Scientists Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty, and many, many others who have been on the ground at these negotiations, putting a lot into this process. We and our allies have been advocating for an ambitious treaty that doesn't limit its focus just to recycling and cleaning up plastic waste in the environment, but a treaty that tackles the harm and pollution caused by plastics across its lifespan. You know, that's right from the drilling of oil and refining it into plastic resins and petrochemicals, to the manufacturing of billions of tons of plastic products every year, the use of those products in the economy, which often is only for a very short time, and then managing them at the end of their life and if they escape into the environment. And this focus on the full lifespan of plastics, I think, helps to understand or helps to clarify what we mean when we say false solutions to plastic pollution, because these are so-called solutions that don't really address the root causes of plastic pollution and the impacts that occur across the full life cycle of plastics. They're activities that make it seem like we're addressing the problem, but more or less just enable the status quo to continue because they focus on just one small part or one symptom of the problem. Ultimately, false solutions just continue to enable the rapid growth in the amount of plastics being produced, and which is predicted to triple in the coming decades by 2050, and then all of the associated harms with that. By contrast, when we focus on actions like reducing the amount of plastics we produce and consume, restricting the use of problematic polymers, chemicals, and additives, and by promoting and investing in systems of reuse, repair, and other zero waste solutions that help keep products and materials in circulation, we ultimately aim not to have so many plastic products and so much plastic waste and pollution to deal with when they do come to the end of their life. But that's probably enough from me for now. Enough blah blah. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists. And so I'm going to introduce our first panelists, Helena Ruffel. So Dr. Helena Ruffel is an environmental scientist. Her research investigated microplastic pollution sources to the environment, focusing on municipal wastewater, solids, and composts. And Helena will be speaking on biodegradable plastics as a false solution. So take it away, Helena.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Liam, for the introduction. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Woohoo! Hopefully you can see that. So kia ora koutou. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. So excited to be able to talk to you all, and let's learn together about all of this. So a little bit about me. I'm an environmental scientist based in Aotearoa, Christchurch, and my research focuses on plastic pollution, microplastics, and I'm quite interested about environmental contamination from the everyday products that we use in our homes. And this particularly comes from the waste streams that we contribute to, like wastewater and compost. And I'm a big fan of zero waste. So, what is biodegradation? So, when we think about biodegradation, it's a natural process. So if we didn't have biodegradation, a whole lot of like organic material would just build up in the environment. So this is when a lot of microorganisms they come together and they help process like things like food scraps, fallen leaves, plants, even us, at the end of our lives, and return us to the building blocks of nature which we came. And so then these building blocks are available for new life to grow. So when we think about biodegradable plastics, we're kind of expecting the same thing to happen, right? That when these plastics are out in the environment, they're going to actually be biodegraded by these microorganisms into these building blocks where other things can grow from. And that would be ideal if that worked, because you can't go for a walk anywhere now without coming across a whole bunch of plastic waste. But we know that plastic waste can persist in the environment for decades, maybe even hundreds of years. And this is because that the biodegradation of plastics requires really specific conditions for this to happen. So this is quite often in commercial composting facilities, and it might happen in our home compost, but we're going to have a bit of a talk about that today. So the thing with plastic is that it's really susceptible to fragmentation in the environment, and this gets confused with biodegradation. So this fragmentation means that these plastics actually end up breaking up into smaller and smaller pieces, which are called microplastics and nanoplastics. So it's really easy for these to just keep becoming smaller and smaller without this actual biodegradation happening. So we're not seeing these plastics be returned into these building blocks, which life can grow from. And so these microplastics are persisting in the environment for probably hundreds of years. So we're going to have a talk about some common biodegradable plastics here if you're not too sure what they're used for. So the first example is with these bin bags and dog poo bags, which you might have seen. So for a start, they're claimed as being home compostable for both, which is probably a little bit confusing because if you think about your household rubbish, you put it in the general waste bin, right? In your red wheelie bin. So this is going to landfill. And the thing with dog poo as well is that it's actually not acceptable to be composted because it contains some certain nasty bacteria which isn't helpful for compost. So these two things are destined to go to landfill. So again, it's also a little bit strange to think, why are we putting these compostable plastics into landfill where it's not actually useful? It's not actually going to biodegrade, and these are actually just going to release greenhouse gases in the landfill. The next is compostable cups and coffee cups. So you might have seen these when you've gone out and purchased a drink in town, and then you're left with this compostable cup, but there's actually nowhere where you can compost it in town because there's only red bins, only general waste bins. So again, these cups are actually not even going to be composted, they're going straight to landfill. So that sounds like a bit of a waste of money, right? And these are quite often made from PLA, which is short for polylactic acid. So this is a type of plastic which is supposedly biodegradable, but only in these certain conditions. So it's actually not going to biodegrade in landfill. And the next one I want to talk about is these coffee cups and these paper bowls. So these actually have a plastic lining in them. So we think, oh, they're just like made from paper. Surely they can be recycled. But they actually contain this sneaky little plastic liner here, which may be made from this biodegradable plastic, PLA, but it means that it's not recyclable. And there's probably little chance it's going to biodegrade in compost, which is what we're going to talk about next. So, with our compost from if you're lucky enough to have a municipal curbside collection, like in Christchurch, we have our green bins. This is an example of compost which was produced from a curbside collection in Aotearoa. So this compost is fully mature. It's been composting away for a couple of months now, and this is ready to go to be used again on market gardens and to grow vegetables with. But we can see that it's actually quite contaminated with a lot of plastic here visually, quite large pieces. And some of these will be biodegradable plastics, especially like these green bags here. So the thing with this is we can see that there's a lot of plastic which hasn't biodegraded during this composting process, and we're expecting there to be quite a lot of microplastics in here. And with my research, I actually looked at compost from 15 facilities around Aotearoa to determine how many microplastics were in there. So this is an example of some of the microplastics which were found from one of these facilities. For context, this is the amount of microplastics in 30 grams of dried compost, and this is a crazy amount of microplastics. And some of these are biodegradable. And the thing is, from out of all of my 15 sites, 14 out of 15 of these sites contained biodegradable plastics. So this is highlighting that these composting facilities are not actually equipped to effectively biodegrade these so-called biodegradable plastics. and the time frame required. In two of these facilities, nearly 50% of the weight of all of the plastics found were biodegradable plastics. So this is further highlighting that these facilities are not able to actually biodegrade any of these biodegradable plastics, so they're effectively the same as any old plastic coming through the composting facility. And again, the thing with these microplastics and biodegradable plastics are they just get smaller and smaller. They break up into microplastics, into nanoplastics, and that's when things get really scary um, for all of the critters in our environment because suddenly they're at really toxic levels. And it means that these biodegradable plastics are going to be applied onto soils where our food is grown. And there's actually no evidence that biodegradable plastics will further biodegrade in soil. So they had their one chance to biodegrade into these little building blocks, and they didn't. So they're not actually going to biodegrade once they're in soil, and they're going to persist there forever, and they're going to cause potential lots of harmful impacts to these soil-dwelling organisms as well as impacting the growth of plants. So that's pretty terrifying. So what are actually biodegradable plastics? They're actually greenwashing. They're not addressing the problem, which is to reduce the amount of plastics that we're using um, or investing in reusable alternatives. What they are is really a marketing scheme to get us to consume more single-use products, which actually will not disappear in the environment, and they're actually going to contribute to worse environmental outcomes. So thank you guys for listening. Hope you've enjoyed hearing more about biodegradable plastics. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Yeah, very interesting, and thanks for. I found the definition of fragmentation versus biodegradation really useful, or really useful way of thinking about it. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions before we move on to the next speaker, and just encourage to all of you out there listening on the Zoom. Yeah, feel free to put through your questions on the chat, and we can come back to them after all the presentations. But Helena, people often assume that because something is made from plants that it's natural, it's just not going to harm the soil, and it will eventually biodegrade. So, could you speak a bit more about plant-based plastics and also the potential chemical additives that are used in compostable and biodegradable plastics?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really a really good question. So when we think about plastics which are made from plants, what happens is that this goes through a chemical process where it's treated chemically beyond recognition. So it's not a plant anymore. It is effectively the same polymer structure as a plastic which is made from oil. So this just means that instead of producing plastics from oil, it's been produced from a plant and then turned into effectively the same product as one made from oil. So that means it's not actually going to biodegrade like we would assume a plant would. It's not a plant anymore. And with the manufacture of all kinds of plastics, it's not just made from plants or oil. There's also quite a lot of chemical additives added in, and these aren't regulated at all. And some of these are really concerning. Some of these are heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and arsenic, and they can be in really, really high levels too. So when we're adding these biodegradable plastics into the soil, and if they do fragment, they're also releasing these toxic chemical additives into the soil. So we're further polluting the soil, not just plastics, but also these chemical additives.
Yeah, fascinating and scary stuff, really. Um, another quick question is, we often hear about. It feels like almost every week there's another news article about scientists looking at a new form of bacteria that can break down plastics. Blah blah blah. What do you think about those things?
Yeah, so It is true. We see them all the time in the news being like, this microorganism has been found to degrade plastic. It's going to be the answer to our problems. And this process is actually quite greatly overstated in the true effect of how much this happens. And this is probably not reflective of what actually happens in the environment. So we're not seeing these plastic degrading organisms actually in the environment. You probably have to put it into some really specific conditions. So, for example, if we were to take these plastic degrading organisms and put them into a composting facility, yeah, that might help increase the degradation, the biodegradation of some of these plastics. But ultimately, these microorganisms are going to go for the least energy intensive meal. So, if you think about it, would you rather eat a piece of pizza or a raw potato? You're going to go for the pizza because it's easier for you to eat than the raw, uncooked potato. And that's kind of the same with microorganisms. They're going to go for what's easier for them. So if you've put them in a composting facility along with a whole bunch of delicious food scraps, they're probably going to quickly eat all of that and not really focus on the plastic there as well. So that's a lot for us to think about with these plastic degrading organisms.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I can see a lot of great questions coming through in the chat. So thanks for those, everyone. But we'll move on to our next speaker now, and we can come back to those questions for Helena. But thank you so much, Helena. So next up, we have Sophie Ockram from Mindful Money. So as the research analyst at Mindful Money, Sophie undertakes environmental research and promotes ethical investment practices through Mindful Money's exclusion list. She's going to discuss the Mindful Money report called Let Our Oceans Breathe, how investors can support ocean health, and specifically the most harmful plastic polluters identified in the report. So over to you, Sophie. Kia ora.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let me just sort myself out. How's that? Cool. Can everyone see that? Lovely. Thank you so much. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko papioia te whenua tupu, ko pōneke te kāinga, he kai rangahau o I putia whai whakaro, ko Sophie O, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everyone, I'd like to thank you so much for joining this webinar today. I would like to thank my fellow panelists who are speaking on such fantastic topics around plastic pollution, and also to the Aotearoa Plastic Pollution Alliance. It's been a fantastic collaboration, so thank you so much. Today I will be talking to you about how investment gives harmful plastic companies power, and about our upcoming report on the topic. So, what is investment? When we think about investment as a concept, you might think about the individual investments you might make to where you put your money. The definition of investment is the act of putting money into something to make a profit or get an advantage. But the reality of investment is a lot of the time you don't have a decision over where your money's going. It's being invested on your behalf, whether that's through a KiwiSaver account or through a fund that you invest in. I assume most people in this webinar have a KiwiSaver, right? A retirement fund where you put your money into, and that money's being invested somewhere, right, on your behalf. When we look at this cartoon, right, we see a very dystopian view of the future where the world's destroyed, and there are very few humans left. Yet this finance guy is saying, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. This might seem like a far off future, but it is the reality right now. There are definitely people in the finance industry that don't really care about where your money's going. All they care about is getting a return on that money. And that's what we care about at Mindful Money. So, what is Mindful Money? We are a charity founded in 2019 by Barry Coates, focused on making money a force for good. And we primarily look at ethical investment into KiwiSavers, but also managed funds in Aotearoa. So in terms of figuring out, okay, well, what do people care about in terms of ethical investment? We have a consumer survey, which we run every year, and we ask members of the public, what do you want to avoid in your investments? And this becomes our issues of concern that we look into at Mindful Money. So our 6 key issues of concern are animal cruelty, fossil fuels, social harm, environmental harm, weapons, and human rights. In our last survey, we found that 91% of consumers want to avoid human rights violations and 89% want to avoid environmental damage in their investments. So, these are things that people really care about. Sorry. Oh, I froze for a second. From here, we create a list of companies of concern which go against these categories, which are doing really egregious things, and that's what we monitor at Mindful Money. So how does this link into our report? This is our upcoming report, Let Our Oceans Breathe, How Investors Can Support Ocean Health. We came to this because we were thinking, usually the finance sector, how it links to nature is it's about how nature affects the share price of a company, right? How nature is a risk to a company. It's not really concerned about how a company affects nature. And so that's why we want to flip the narrative and look at, okay, what are the companies which are most harmful to our oceans, but also how much investment is in those companies? How much investment is backing up what those harmful companies are doing? So we decided to focus on 5 key categories in this report, which are plastic pollution, fishing, ocean acidification, deep sea mining, and waste dumping and pollution. And from this, we decided to focus on a few companies that we thought were had some of the worst impact. We'd also like to acknowledge the feedback we've received about the use of the term nature-based investing in this report. As Mindful Money toes the line between working with the investment community and promoting better ethical investment practice, we do our best to use terminology and language that reflects our audience. So just want to acknowledge that. So when we're talking about plastic pollution, these have been the biggest companies that we've found that are the largest sources of plastic garbage in the world's oceans. Current data estimate there's approximately 11 million metric tons of plastic waste entering the oceans annually, which is adding to an estimated 200 million, which is already present. And this plastic is throughout the water column in our oceans. It's in the flesh of the fish we eat. It has microplastics in human brains. It's everywhere. And it's a deep harm that this plastic pollution is causing, and we don't even know the full extent of it yet. In these 6 companies alone, there's over 570 million in KiwiSaver investment. And that accounts for 280 out of 400 KiwiSaver funds with investment in these companies. It's your hard-earned money that's being invested into these companies. So it's a very harmful thing we're looking at here. I would just also like to note that just the report scope, and we do intend to look into more plastic pollution companies in future, and we would invite suggestions from the Zero Waste Network and from UPA and etc., as we would like to continue our list. Sorry, did I freeze there for a second? Oh, good. Okay, we're back. So, it's not only these companies that are causing the most plastic pollution in our oceans, but they're also trying to cover up what they're doing. They're not being completely transparent with people. This is from an ad that Coca-Cola is running on YouTube, where it's talking about how it's cleaning up the coastlines and doing a lot of great stuff for cleaning our beaches. But as the #1 plastic polluter of garbage in our oceans, what is it doing to stop plastics at the production stage, to stop actually producing those plastics in the first place? Well, Coca-Cola is getting rid of its glass bottle deposit schemes in favor of single-use plastic. Another company on our report, Nestle, has changed its targets from recyclable to designed for recycling. So it's really unfortunate that these companies are causing, a lot of harm, and they're trying to be really secretive and they're trying to hide what they're doing. As Liam mentioned, the Global Plastics Treaty just failed this past week, which was super unfortunate, and there's a lot of lobbying against it. But it wasn't only from those petrochemical countries and fossil fuel companies, but some of these plastic companies were also lobbying for a weaker treaty. So, they're right in there trying to cause harm, and they're not doing much to stop it. So it's a pretty bleak picture. What can you do about it as an individual? Well, right now on our website, if you look up your fund, you're able to see if there's any of these 6 plastic companies that your fund is investing in. So this is an example from the Superlife KiwiSaver Value Fund, and they have investments in Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Mondelez. You have to remember, right? Your money has power. So you're not only able to change your fund or divest, you can ask your fund provider to divest. You can say you're concerned about their investments. You are able to do so, and that has a real impact on the fund. So it's a super impactful thing you can do as an individual. This is our website. So not only can you look up your fund on our website and see what they're invested in, but you can also see alternative funds to compare with. We have a list of mindful funds, which we consider to have good ethics and good investments, and you can check out what their investments are on our website. Our upcoming Oceans report will be on our website under the Learn tab. We have other reports as well, so you're welcome to check that out. And I'd also like to say this is a forerunner to our upcoming Oceans campaign, which will be released over the next 4 months. And we'd really love to hear from you if you're interested in engaging or want more informational materials. And we intend to continue with this project into the future. So yeah, any feedback is really appreciated. Cool, that's me. Thank you so much, everyone.
Kia ora, Sophie. Thank you. Really, really awesome. Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, it's no surprise to see those same old big plastic polluters in the top polluters you found, and just a lot of investment in going to them. So that was really interesting to see those numbers. Yeah, and just seeing that, you know, they do what looks good, but in the background they're just winding back on actions and targets and things. So I think it was great that you've offered people a way to look at potentially where maybe some of their investments or KiwiSaver are invested in, and yeah, how they can find out whether some of those brands are there. So that's great. I just wanted to ask around. So in the report, you do recognise the importance of some mātauranga and tikanga Māori, and also and its influence on investment, and in particular, for example, in relation to the concept of legal personhood for nature, or the concept of kiuta ki tai, or the practice of rāhui. And there's also a recognition in the report of where Māori ocean and coastal rights have been eroded by legislation, and you know we've seen that again recently with passing of the Takutai moana amendment. So, but I guess my question really is, how do we ensure that iwi hapu whānau Māori are not just kind of consulted or considered when it comes to investment and business decisions, but you know that they themselves, you know, are supported to lead and deliver solutions that protect and regenerate nature. You know, what are the pathways to invest in projects led by iwi Māori?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, sorry.
I'll mute myself. Sorry.
How's that? Okay, great. Fantastic. It's a really good question. I'd really love to direct you to Tahito, which is a fantastic Indigenous-led fund. They have very ethical values, and they're also Indigenous-led. Thank you, Tash, for linking that. And they are currently the only fund that has a climate-friendly badge on our website. So they're doing really fantastic work. So I'd really love to direct you there. There's a lot of fantastic people in the area of ethical investment. You know, we've seen so much change in ethical investment in just the last 5 years. And I think there's more to come. And Tahito is just one of the fantastic ways forward for iwi and Māori people. So yeah, they're fantastic.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, and yeah, I think it was, like I said, it was great to guide people towards not only what we should be divesting from, but what we can invest in. That's really positive, and I encourage others, if you've got ideas as well here around like positive investments that we could be making, you know, be really keen to hear your thoughts and feedback on that, and particularly around waste minimization and plastic pollution reduction stuff too. Just one other question, Sophie, is kind of around, and you did touch on it in your presentation, just how you arrived at some of the conclusions in your report and the scope of it, I suppose.
Yeah, totally.
As I mentioned in the introduction to this webinar, a lot of us in plastic pollution advocacy are aware that there are loads of brands out there. There's definitely those top ones, but there's the hundreds of companies that are really contributing to plastic pollution, and as we've heard from Helena as well, we know that microplastics and chemicals can be really important sources of plastic pollution too. So yeah, just like you just talk a bit more about the scope of your report, why you sort of limited the focus in the way you did, and is there scope for further research on the kind of less conspicuous sources of ocean plastic pollution potentially, and the implications for investment?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we definitely limited. Oh, sorry, my voice. Can you? Yeah, thank you. We definitely limited the scope for this report. It's the first time, as far as we're aware, of people linking investment in nature in such a way. So we really wanted to introduce people to the topic with the start, and we also wanted to make sure that we cover the topics well, and we wanted to give people a picture of the issue. But this is just the beginning. This is the beginning of a series we're doing on nature and investment. We're hoping to do a couple reports on, we're going to do a freshwater report in the future, and also one on land use and deforestation, and potentially some others. So there's definitely more room for more plastic companies, and we're intending on adding more in the future. So this is just to give people a snapshot, but we really want this to be the beginning of a movement in the investment space towards more better practice and, yeah, calling out those bad companies. So definitely room for that.
Awesome. Oh, that's cool. So watch the space for more great work. So yeah, thanks so much, Sophie.
Thanks, Liam.
And again, seeing some questions come through, so we'll come back to those after the rest of our presentations. But let's hand over now to Lydia Chai. So as both a lawyer and an activist, Lydia has been driving real change, including leading a powerful petition to Parliament to stop plastic waste exports to developing countries. And Lydia is going to speak to the hidden world of the global waste trade. So I'll hand it over to you, Lydia.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just share my screen now. Bear with me. Can everyone see that, please? Great. Okay. Kia ora koutou. My name's Lydia Chai. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I come from a place called Selangor in Malaysia. That's me. And the start of my advocacy journey was back in 2021 when I discovered that New Zealand still exports plastic waste to developing countries, specifically my hometown. I was quite shocked to learn that. And when it gets there, the waste is burned openly and was buried. So it was causing a lot of environmental and health harms in my hometown. And so I started this petition to the New Zealand government. It was Labour government back then, and obtained about 11,000 signatures and delivered it to the Parliament in July 2022. Now, just to set the scene, this is what most New Zealanders think recycling is. We put our recycling on the curbside. It's sorted by the council or a private company contracted by the council, and then taken to a sorting facility where all the stuff that can be recycled is taken out, and all the stuff that can't be recycled is just sent to landfill. So it's this either recycled in New Zealand or sent to landfill story that most New Zealanders think recycling is. However, I'm here to tell you the missing piece to that story, which is that a lot of our recycling is sold overseas. And that's the full picture, a potted picture of what I'm trying to tell you. So when it's recycled in New Zealand, the virgin plastic is added, and then it's made into things like meat trays and polar fleece, or it's sent to landfill, or it's sold overseas to developing countries. Now, use the word sold specifically instead of shipped overseas, because I don't want to mislead you thinking that we're shipping waste overseas and then it gets immediately burned or dumped. That's not what's happening. It's actually sold as a valuable commodity. And this is because of a recent high demand for companies to pronounce that their products are made from recycled plastic. So it is a valuable commodity. In terms of numbers, I'll just go back to that. So in terms of numbers, we don't know how much is recycled in New Zealand or sold overseas. What I can tell you, as of this year, New Zealand collects about 55 million kilograms of plastic waste every year. And half of that is exported, and most that is exported to Southeast Asia. So that's places like Indonesia, Malaysia. I've also heard it expressed as every New Zealander sends about 6 kilograms of plastic waste overseas per year, and 3 kilograms of that goes to Malaysia. I also know that every year, I think 1 billion plastic bottles are used by New Zealanders. So it's an incredible amount that we're using, recovering, sending overseas. And this here is a picture of a nice looking plastic bale of plastic, nice plastic bale sitting somewhere in those sorting facilities I mentioned earlier. So it's sitting somewhere in New Zealand, getting ready to be shipped. However, it still has contamination within it, and contamination is a big thing in the waste industry because you can't recycle contamination. And when I say contamination, I mean things like, in the context of this plastic bale, I mean things like bottle tops, the plastic labels, or the food scraps within the product. And a bale like this would probably have anything between 0.5 to about 20% contamination. So I guess up to 1/5 of this bale would be contaminated and would have to be burned, gotten rid of, disposed of at the end and destination. Now, this is what happens to a bale that's contaminated. One of many things that could happen. And I bet you're probably thinking right now, Lydia, you just told us moments ago, this is a valuable commodity. Why on earth would it be dumped as soon as it was shipped? Why would it be burned or gotten rid of? Well, it could be a couple of things. So one reason might be that a nice plastic bale like the one I just showed you was sitting around in a sorting facility or a recycling factory for months and months, and it's in the tropics, so mold collects on the bale and devalues it really quickly. So as soon as you get mold or other stuff in it, that's it. It's really hard to process it and get some value out of it. Or it could be that the facility it was at was maybe an illegal operator, and so they had to like dump and run, and dumping is often cheaper than disposing of it legally at the landfill. Just more pictures of these field trips that activists have gone around and documented of plastic waste. And this is all in my hometown. I don't have time to talk about these people, but they're very important activists in the industry. Okay, so I'll come to this picture here, which shows, don't be alarmed, this is not happening super often, but this is a recycling plant on fire in the state of Perak, which is the neighboring state to Selangor, where I'm from. This was back in 2021, and it's not happening often now, but it does happen once in a while. And in 2021, it was happening a lot of times. This is because arson is often used in the waste industry, in the dodgy waste industry, to get rid of stuff when they have to run or they just can't find a way to get rid of stuff. So they would actually commit arson and then move to some other location. And if you think this is a far-fetched theory, it's actually well documented in a book called Wasteland by Oliver Franklin Wallace. I often get asked if we have found New Zealand waste in Malaysia, and the answer is yes. Here's a picture, but this is an old picture from about 2021. So I've updated my data, and this is from 2025. This is Malaysian waste, but this is in Indonesia. Excuse me, I'm a bit sick. Indonesia has the same problems as Malaysia. And I really urge all of you to Google Bantar Gebang, which is basically a town built on the largest landfill in the world. It's horrifying, but it's really eye-opening, and it's something that everyone should be aware of. I'll just skip this video right now. And this is a video I want to show you of a recycling plant in Indonesia. It could also be Malaysia, but this is a place where very well that New Zealand waste could end up. So it will end up in one of these places, and I'll just show you a few seconds of the factory. I guess I'm showing you this video because the story of waste is a human story. And looking at this video, it could very well be a gendered story, but I don't really know much about that angle. I'm not sure if it's mostly women working in the waste picker industry or in these factories. So here, the next couple of slides are kind of a summary. Why is this a problem? Well, all bales contain contamination, and contamination leads to the bales being dumped or buried or on-sold to avoid the legal disposal costs. As well, Malaysia and Indonesia have very relaxed environmental laws, so I guess developed countries take advantage of that. And we've also got very poor enforcement. I have to add also that we don't have local elections. We don't elect our mayors or councillors. So there's no democracy on that level. And so even if you have like a legit recycling company, you really don't know if they bought their permit the right way or without bribes, because corruption is really rife in Southeast Asia. In my home state alone, there are 332 recycling plants. That's in the state of Selangor. And Malaysia has 14 states. And this is the amount is high because we really are the world's dumping ground. Back to why this is a problem. Well, the good news is that most New Zealand plastic is recycled. However, this is a gigantic caveat. We are sending eye-watering amounts of waste to Southeast Asia. In the last 6 years, New Zealand sent about 200 million kilograms overseas, and also the plastic waste processing plastic waste is inherently toxic. So even if you had a really good, environmentally sound factory processing the plastic, you can get up to 13% of that plastic being leached into the environment. So it's a huge amount of leaching that occurs. So just to wrap it up, what happened since my petition? The select committee reviewed it and considered a licensing system where companies need to get a license from the government in order to export plastic waste. This is great from the viewpoint of monitoring the data and collecting data, because we have no data, but it doesn't solve the problem of all the problems I just ran you through just now. So it's up to us to put the pressure on leaders, corporate leaders, politicians. We just want to reduce plastic at the source. And also this year, Malaysia has banned plastic waste imports from the USA, but that was kind of like a a retaliation to the US tariffs. So I guess it takes like a country to impose tariffs on Malaysia for it to grow a backbone and ban plastic waste imports. Here's 2 books I highly recommend. Wasteland, I mentioned earlier, and also a recent one, Waste Wars. I really like Waste Wars because it talks about the waste industry from a colonialist viewpoint. So it talks about waste colonialism. That's a very valuable angle. And thank you very much. That was it.
Awesome. Thank you, Lydia. Really appreciate you bringing, all your work in this and bringing this issue to probably many New Zealanders' attention. So thank you. I found some of those stats pretty pretty wild. Yeah, like 6 kilograms per person that New Zealanders are sending. Basically sending overseas. Do you know what percentage of all of the plastics? Maybe you said it and I missed it, but what percentage New Zealand is exporting as opposed to recycling on shore? Do you know in terms of percentage? You're on mute too, by the way.
Sorry, I may have mentioned it just now. Let me just check my notes. No, I actually don't know the percentage. I just know that it's 55 million kilograms a year. But I know that half of it gets sent overseas to Southeast Asia, which is huge.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Actually, the questions I wanted to ask were, are there examples of around the world of any country kind of opting out, as you could say, of the global waste trade? Any good examples we could look to?
Yes. So the European Union has banned plastic waste exports to non-OECD countries starting from May next year, May 2026, and they can only export waste to OECD countries. There are some caveats with that, though, which I can't remember right now, but that was a huge decision made a couple of years ago, which will take into effect next year. Also, last year, Thailand banned the imports of plastic waste, and Indonesia followed suit this year.
Thanks, Lydia, and thank you for bearing with your illness as well, and being here to present for us. Just one more quick question. In your view, do you think that exporting plastic waste, should be allowed under any circumstance, or should countries like ours, should we just learn to deal with our own waste and not export it at all?
My view on that is that if you give a polluter an inch, they take a foot. And that's why talking about this in terms of waste colonialism is really helpful, because of the power imbalance. So I'm interested in extreme overcorrection, I guess. So I wouldn't be agreeable to some exports, I think.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Really appreciate your work on this. Highlighting really important issues there that many people may not have been aware of. So thank you. As I've been saying, feel free to keep writing questions in the chat as we go. We've just got one more presenter before we can open it up for more questions, but I'll now hand over to Sue Kurtz. Sue is a zero waste legend in Aotearoa, who's been working tirelessly over many years on increasing the awareness and engagement and support of community-led zero waste initiatives and policies. Sue is the External Affairs Director for Zero Waste Aotearoa, and is going to be speaking on waste incineration as a false solution to mitigating plastic waste. So over to you, Sue.
Oh, thanks, Liam. Yeah, Paul Mare, everyone, and cracking now. I've got just get my video going. Okay, so you guys can see that okay? Yep, great. Yeah, great. It's always terrifying to learn a whole lot of new stuff on a Wednesday evening about, how you're complicit in a lot of problems all over the world. But, just going to talk a little bit about incineration and share some of the background around the problems that we're having with that in New Zealand at the moment as well. So, I'll launch in and, thanks so much for making the time to be here with us all. Yeah, they're huge and they're so expensive. Not only will the waste sector get a whole new source of greenhouse gas emissions, but every single one we sell comes with a free dose of dioxin and heavy metals. As you will have seen in the news or heard in your districts, incinerator proposals have been popping up around Aotearoa the last 5 years. Started down on the west coast, over to Waimate, Fielding, Te Awamutu. There's been talk of one up in Kaipara, and the latest is Marsden Point. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide, actually. Anyway. Sorry, I'm just got a bit of a cold, so I'm not 100% on to it today. Okay. We all know that we've got problems. One of the terrifyingly cool things about science geeks is that they keep figuring out stuff we'd probably rather not know. We have had the big reveal about planetary boundaries, and then we find out that we've already crossed 6 of the 9, including the novel entities one, which is most relevant to plastic. More and more plastics being produced, only a very small percentage of it ever gets reused or recycled, and the rest is either disposed of or escapes into our environment. Producers are feeling the pressure from their customers who want a better story, to tell about what they're buying. And so they're looking at burning and chemical recycling to make it seem like our plastic problems have gone away. The global incinerator companies are looking to keep their business models going for a few more years. They're putting their sales pitches on the table, and they're really a perfect combination of really slick marketing and dense technical gobbledygook. They overstate the benefits and they understate the costs and risks, and they present incineration as a magic bullet that's going to make our waste problems vanish. But none of these problems are going to be solved by us burning or burying stuff. And that's because the real damage is all getting done upstream. We've all stood there wondering, you buy something, you end up with a pile of packaging to deal with, or sooner or later you have a product that you don't want anymore because your drink bottle was designed for a single use, your shirt wasn't built to last, and your phone's become obsolete. Burn it or bury it, the damage is already done. We get sold the convenience story. Plastic packaging, oh, so cheap, so useful, so safe. But our experience of convenience rides on the back of all the costs and risks and damage that are pushed out in space into other people, onto other people in other places, onto ecosystems that we depend on, and into other times in the future. Zero waste strategies are a fundamental challenge to the way that we live our lives and the way we run our economy. It's about going really deep inside ourselves to find a different way of being in the world. Our version of growth isn't bigger, better, faster, more. It's about growing the knowledge and capability to live zero waste lifestyles that are simpler and closer and connected and satisfying. It's time to stop managing our waste problems and start solving them. Finding solutions means going up into our supply chains, designing plastic waste and pollution and chemicals of concern out of business models, out of products, out of packaging, creating systems that keep materials and things in use for as long as possible. Finding solutions means cleaning up the contaminated sites we've already got and not making any more new ones. The safe level of exposure to dioxin is 0. It makes absolutely no sense to build an incinerator that'll emit dioxins, heavy metals, and PFAS when we're so dependent on our food production industries. Finding solutions means investing the $350 million that we were going to blow on an incinerator on renewable wind and solar, and using the gate fees we were going to pay for the next 30 years to fund reuse, repair, and high-quality recycling instead. And finding long-term mokopuna solutions means building an economy that supports the well-being of our people and our planet, and holding the line by not investing in industries that create harm. One of the things that I learned from watching way too many cowboy movies as a kid is that snake oil salesmen have to keep moving because the truth always catches up with them in the end. Small towns and districts are vulnerable to these incinerator salesmen. The politicians get sucked in because they really want to make something good happen for their town. And of course, the incinerator guys have their own best interests at heart. It's a story of mind over matter. They don't mind, and we don't matter. Sharing information between communities is a super powerful way of protecting our places and our people. Do these things actually work? Oh, what did they tell you when they came to your town? What happened when they set one up near you? And the company behind, like for example, the company behind the Waimate incinerator just keeps on popping back up in new towns with the same old story. The application to build an incinerator in Te Awamutu has been making its way through the system. Scrap metal company Global Contracting Solutions applied to build an incinerator on a racecourse road near homes, schools, and a great big Fonterra plant. Our Environment Minister Penny Simmons called in the application as a matter of national significance so that all of the impacts could be properly considered. The Zero Waste Network and the Environmental Defence Society teamed up to oppose the application when it went to the Board of Inquiry. It's a bit of a nail-biter. The board's decision will either shut or open the floodgates on these rubbish incinerator proposals. And at the end of last week, the Environmental Protection Agency put the inquiry process on hold until the company pays its share of the costs. Turns out they haven't finished paying their bills from the Waipawa District Council or the Waikato Regional Council either. If this plant went ahead, it'd be the first of its kind in New Zealand. It's totally reasonable to expect that councils and our government would do some due diligence so they can make a judgment call on whether the claims stack up and to assess the impacts as the representatives of our public good. This is a large-scale infrastructure project. Best guess is it's maybe $500 million to get it up and running. You would expect that the company would have allocated a reasonable budget to cover the consenting process. There's a lot going on over in Australia too at the moment. The idea of putting incinerators in urban areas like Sydney got the thumbs down. They probably heard that the people who live in the 700 districts around Paris's state-of-the-art incinerator can't eat the eggs or the veggies that they grow in their backyards because of dioxin pollution. Australia is planning to burn about 4 million tonnes of rubbish, which will emit about 4 million tonnes of CO2. In what feels like an episode of The Simpsons, New South Wales is setting up a special activation precinct in a town called Parkes, where the normal rules won't apply. A huge incinerator, pyrolysis plants, and a chemical recycling facility are all on the cards. And something that makes me very nervous is that Shane Jones is putting up a bill to create special economic zones like this in New Zealand. Marsden Point could soon be the new home of waste-to-energy incineration gadgets via Channel Infrastructure's new energy precinct. There was at least 3 waste-to-energy incinerator projects that sought to be included in the fast-track approvals regime. The Waimate incinerator did get included in the fast-track list, but it couldn't go ahead because their land deal fell apart. It doesn't give you a lot of confidence in the people that are putting these projects up when we see 2 people falling over in such a short time because they didn't have the cash to be able to progress their applications. Imagine a world where our government put reuse and recycling infrastructure on the fast-track list. You guys have been waiting for ages to get your stuff sorted. Come on up to the front of the queue. Imagine a world where we had a levy on each tonne of waste that went to landfill and we actually invested that money in reuse and reduction infrastructure. An infrastructure deficit of 2.5 or 3 billion, levy funds of 250 or 300 million a year. In 10 years, we could set ourselves up. At the moment, if you burn rubbish in a waste-to-energy incinerator, you don't have to pay the levy. If you bury it in a landfill, you do. You have to burn a lot of rubbish to get a very small amount of energy, and burning plastic emits a massive amount of CO2. The last thing we need in the waste sector is a whole new emission source. One of the good things in the proposal to update our Waste Act is removing the exemption for waste-to-energy incineration, so that both disposal methods, burning rubbish and burying rubbish, face the same cost structure. That makes sense to us, makes sense to the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment as well. For the last 5 years, communities have been fighting these incinerator proposals off one by one. We can't afford to keep wasting our time and energy doing this in town after town or all across the motu. And we don't want you to have to waste a year or 2 of your life fighting these incinerator guys when they eventually get to your town. So we've launched a new petition that we'd love you to sign to help us keep Aotearoa incinerator free. We want the government to step up and ban rubbish incinerators because of the serious long-term impacts they'd have on our health, our climate, and our environment. There's loads of useful information on our Incinerator Free NZ website, and there's regular updates on all the live proposals. You can sign up. Together, we can keep Aotearoa incinerator free.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Awesome. That's so cool, and I just love that reference to the cowboy movies. It's so great and so relevant. I wanted to ask around. A lot of people often say, and there've been a couple of questions in the chat around, what about, our modern incinerators? They are much better, right? They don't pollute like the old ones did. Or, what about Europe? Shouldn't we be? They've been doing it for ages. Surely it's fine if they do it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, I think when you look at how it's going for countries that have been using incinerators for 25 or 30 years, you look at somewhere like Denmark, often used as a poster child for the success of incineration. But the advice of its leaders at the moment is that if you don't already have an incinerator, you're way better to invest up the hierarchy in recycling and reuse. Denmark's got the highest per capita waste generation in Europe. They can't meet their emissions reduction targets because burning rubbish creates a massive amount of CO2, and they can't meet their recycling targets either because a lot of their recycling is ending up in the incinerator because, surprise, surprise, plastic burns very well, as we saw in Lydia's slides. So basically they're using a managed retreat from incineration. They've started to shut down some of their incinerators. And if you look at the EU regulatory framework, they've published a set of definitions to clarify what does and doesn't qualify as sustainable economic activity. And that's meant to guide finance and investment decisions, especially of using public money in the big public development funds. And incineration's been excluded because it harms the transition to a circular economy.
Yeah, thanks for that. Probably just have time for one more question for you at this point, but I wanted to kind of just ask, kind of on a side issue to the incineration thing. Members of Zero Waste Aotearoa, a lot of members, and particularly resource recovery centres, have to deal with plastic waste all the time.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around the key challenges around plastics, and if incineration and landfilling would just not even having that conversation, what would you suggest are viable solutions for those who are dealing with this stuff at the front line?
Well, I think I started off in this industry working at a local recycle centre, and I think the thing that astonished me is just how much plastic and how much recycling there is. When you're actually there at the coalface day to day, you're just like, it's massively overwhelming. Even 6 kilos of plastic, if you put that on your kitchen table, you'd have a massive pile because it's very light. I think that the main problems that we ran into with our operations was that there's no revenue stream attached to the work. So there's no money in the system to deal with the recycling or the collection or the transport. You have to really work hard to try to build willingness to pay in your community if you want to do that. And then even if you can, as Lydia said, there's no transparency about what the outcomes are. Council doesn't really tell you what happens. Companies won't tell you what happens. Even if you do that whole thing of going back to another country and looking around, and there you find our potato chip packets or our, it's just insane. People would be very upset if they really knew the reality of what's happening. So I think that one of the things that we're really encouraging people to do is, similar to Mindful Money, it's building coalition of the willing. All of us, getting together, when we spend $1, we're basically choosing it's a vote for our future that we want to have, that we want to have coming up. So trying to work with people that want to change their business models, ramping up reuse and repair and local scale composting to manage contamination, getting real strong feedback loops in the system so that, you can really get people on board with the idea of why it's so important not to contaminate their compost, because you want to eat the veggies that you're going to grow with that material in, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. So local reuse solutions for serviceware and beverage is a great option. We can see those starting to come in a lot of the smaller breweries around the country, and also a lot of the event organizers like Feel Good, or there's quite a few people now who are really trying to get reusable serviceware out there for people to use, and really modeling what the future could look like. And one of the great things is that when you create those small local loops, the money stays in the local economy, and the outcomes and the impacts are really easy to track and trace, and you can see what the outcomes are. And one of the things that I used to love about Wastebusters was you could almost follow the $20 around the community. Somebody pays to pick up their recycling, one of our staff would get paid, they'd go and buy some dinner at the local cafe. That money, that those guys would use it to pay a bill to the local veggie guys. Local veggie guy goes to the movie theater guy pays us for our recycling. That $20 can go round and round and round the community before it spins off out to the Australian banks. And so I think that those local solutions, I guess what we're really seeing from a lot of the presentations tonight is just lying. And it's so good when you can have a really clear system and local area and keep track of what's happening. You can get some real accountability. You can see the people that are doing the job. They have to face up to you in the supermarket or in the street, or maybe the local organic shop, and just really own the value of their own work and what they're doing. So I'm really encouraging everyone to start thinking more about how reuse can be part of our world. And we know that recycling is not the answer. If we think it is, then we're really asking the wrong question.
Awesome. Yeah, brilliant answer. Thank you, Sue. Yeah, and so we've got about 15 minutes left for our hui tonight. So I'd just like to, ask some of the questions that have been popping up in the chat, and I can see that there have actually been quite a lot of written interactions in there already. So if any of you would like to, ask follow-up questions or anything like that, feel free to do so and continue to ask more questions. And I've got a couple of questions myself if we run out, but I'll just pick a few from the chat for now. So early on, this one's for you, Helena. Early on, Anita asked, and you might have already had a bit of a discussion on this, but what's your recommendation for small island developing states where there is water scarcity and reusable containers are not an option? Start with you, Helena, and if anyone else has any responses too.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant question. Thank you, Anita. And that is actually quite tricky to answer because I would obviously very much like to push the reusables here. But I mean, if water scarcity is a massive barrier, then I understand that it's really tricky. I don't have any experience with working in the Pacific or anything like that, so I'm not aware about their waste processing at all. So I'm not really too sure about what facilities are available there. But I would just, probably really like to discourage at least the use of biodegradable plastics and even like other kinds of compostable serviceware, which may be made from paper, but they of course have that plastic lining, or even if they are made from paper like pizza boxes, they still contain potentially nasty chemical additives like for example pizza boxes and like burger clamshells. They are lined with PFAS and other kinds of chemicals which mean that they're not able to like absorb moisture, so that's what makes it like quite smooth as well, and so that's also contributing to soil pollution. So yeah, if space is also really limited, then we don't want to be adding these biodegradable plastics along with these compostable paper products with these potentially damaging chemical additives into the soil, which would be potentially used directly to grow food from. So that's probably where I'm thinking. And yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but would really like definitely encourage you to look at Reuse Aotearoa for their work that they've done. And potentially Break Free from Plastic Asia Pacific might have some more answers. But yeah, it's a really tricky problem, but a really cool project. And yeah, I would be keen to connect with you as well to have a chat about it. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Elena. I don't know if anyone else had anything they wanted to add on that question before I move on. No. All good. So there's a few, another question just come through from Portia. And this, I think, is for you, Sophie. Any info on the best place to save your money outside of KiwiSaver, most ethical, least damaging bank to use?
Great question. I wish at Mindful Money we don't really have the capacity to look at banks right now, but we're really interested in looking at them in the future. So it's a future project we're hoping to look at. But a lot of KiwiSaver funds are linked to banks. So, you know, BNZ, etc., have their own funds. So you can find information about which KiwiSaver funds linked to banks are invested in things on our website. But yeah, we don't do a specific focus on banks yet. But that's for the future, hopefully.
Cool. And then, yeah, some people are sort of throwing in their thoughts around that too. So that's cool in the chat. Here's a new one from Helena to Sophie. What are some red flags for people who to try to do their digging into companies? Sorry, I'll say it again. Yeah, what are some red flags for people to try do their digging into companies?
Totally. Oh.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. I think it's becoming harder and harder to find valuable information on companies because with the prevalent use of AI, we're seeing a lot more auto-generated stuff at the moment. We're seeing a lot more paywalled content, so it's harder to access good content and good research, which you probably know, Helena, from being in the academic space. But I think it's just super important to see their use of language. I mean, it's like with Nestle, recyclable versus designed for recycling. There's a lot in the use of language. I think there's a lot of we use a lot of other reports as source as well. You know, I think Break Free from Plastics work was a big helpful use in our oceans report. So relying on other NGOs and their reports has been super useful for validifying our information. But when we're looking into companies, we use Sustainalytics, which is a great service for looking at sustainable companies, and we compare it with investment decisions from a lot of major banks. So Norges Bank is one, Brand is another. They have their own. It's also really helpful to see what are the super bad companies that are out there as well. So yeah, it's about kind of getting valid sources, which isn't always easy. So we try our best.
Awesome. There haven't been any new questions in the chat, but I've got one. I've got another one for you, Lydia. And it's sort of linking to Mindful Money's ocean report to what you told us about the global waste industry. Can you tell us about the effects of like on land industry and what that how that connects to the oceans in terms of pollution?
Oh, that's an interesting question because I think it was a couple of years ago that another report came out saying Southeast Asia has the highest plastic pollution or marine pollution of plastic or something. And the report itself didn't really link it to the waste industry. It just kind of named and shamed Southeast Asia. And so it was like Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, all these countries dealing with the world's waste. And I think people didn't really join the dots either. The other thing that came out, I guess, last year was that Malaysians are this is not a proud statistic, but we are the highest consumers of microplastics in our food. Like we eat the most microplastics, and that's because Malaysians eat a lot of seafood. So obviously it's having an impact on our health as well. And I guess another fact I could throw in there is that the river that feeds the port where the waste trade enters Malaysia is the fourth polluted river, plastic polluted river in the world. So yeah, it has a big impact on our marine life and our health, all that stuff. It's all linked.
Thanks, Lydia. Lorella's just put a question for you, Lydia, as well. Do you think people are more aware than when you first started in this field that New Zealand sends its waste overseas to Southeast Asia? rather than it staying in New Zealand. And yeah, perhaps what happens to that plastic once it's magically recycled.
Thanks, Lorella. Yes, I actually do think people are more aware, because since I started my petition, there have been a lot more news pieces and coverage about it in the media. And it's a topic that people are still interested in. And I'm still getting media inquiries about whatever that comes up. So I think, yes, I think the petition has had a positive impact that way, and people are more aware. Thank you.
Cool. Just as we sort of come towards the end of our time, I have a question that would be nice to hear from all of our panelists, just sort of maybe as a closing reflection, because we've heard a lot about problems, what we shouldn't be doing to tackle plastic pollution, what are some false solutions and things. But I'd like to know, in your view, what are the most important things we could and should be doing instead, and whether that's an action we could all take as individuals, or whether it's the systemic change that we need to work towards. So maybe if we could go in the order of our panelists, if you like, so Helena, Sophie, Lydia, and Sue.
Yeah, kia ora. Thanks, Liam, for that. Definitely agree on promoting reusables in all aspects of our life as well. Yep, that would be mine.
I think something that we can all do is, well, firstly, you can divest your money, but you can also call out your fund provider. If you're concerned about their investments in particular, you can contact them. And I would really recommend that people do that. You're able to call them out and say, why are you investing in these companies? It's very dodgy, and you want to know where your money's going. So I would definitely recommend that for people.
Me next. Mine's kind of like Helena's. So I find it helpful to think of it as stop using single use, Lydia. So in my daily life, I try to abide by that. So not to replace it with these so-called bioplastics. Yeah, that's one thing that I hope more people will do.
Yeah, I'll go for stepping stones. Like we can't just go straight to the end and go, oh, here's the answer, the perfect answer. So I'd say that one thing I'd support is like the idea of container return scheme is a really great way of, if we are going to do recycling, let's harvest a massive amount of it. Let's get 85, 90% of the containers back instead of the 20 or 30 or 40% we might be getting now, depending on which material we're talking about. And then that would also help us to set up, that would fund setting up a reverse logistics system and a harvesting system for reusables, and like whether it's drink containers or food containers. And so it sets us up for the future, and it also gets everyone trained to bring their things back, and to handle them with care and to be thoughtful about what they're up to. So I think there's lots of these things that are happening all around the world that we could pick up in New Zealand. Very low risk strategies. They've already been done. People have worked all the bugs out of them. We could just drop them in and be off and running. And if we want to get some decent infrastructure in this country for, to solve our waste problems, we really need to be, just starting to tick these jobs off. We know what the answers are. We just have to commit to doing it, which is something that we haven't seen our governments doing, year on year or term on term.
Awesome. Well, four really great answers to that question, and yeah, leaving us on maybe a positive and kind of more action-oriented note. So I really appreciate that. And thanks again to everyone who's come to this webinar. Lots of really great questions in the chat, and hopefully you've had satisfactory answers to your questions too. But we always encourage you to be in touch and to follow up if you've got any further questions. Please do get in touch with us. You can find APA online on our website. Thank you, Tash has just linked it in there into the chat, and also Mindful Money. We'd be happy to respond and answer any follow-up questions. Or if you want to join APA as a member, we welcome you to join us too. We've got a registration form website there too. Thanks again to our amazing panelists, Helena, Sophie, Lydia, Sue. You're all fantastic and learnt heaps from all of you tonight. Yeah, thanks to everyone again for coming along, and also to Tash for doing so much in the background there, and sending through lots of links and things, and doing a lot to help pull this whole webinar together. So yeah, we'll probably follow up with everyone who's registered with some more information, and also the recording of this webinar. If you want to go back and check it out or share it with your friends, yeah, you'll be welcome to do that. So thanks again, and I'll close us with the karakia and say good night. Lovely. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Kumari e. Thanks everyone.